Let's say that you are shipwrecked on a deserted island. What do you do? Well, first you have to recognize that your labor is a scarce resource. Then you need to create a list of what to produce under the knowledge of the amount of labor that those things expend. Let us say, though, that you ate some bad island mushrooms that affected your judgment and caused you to forget about how much labor each task requires. If you were to create a new list of priorities of what to produce under the false belief that your labor is infinite and all-powerful, then would your list of what to produce be different than the list you made when you took the scarcity of your labor into account? Of course, it would be vastly different. And when you finally sobered up, you would realize all of that labor that you have wasted, which could very well mean you dying on that island. We can only create a list of what material things we truly value the most if we take the production cost of those items into account. Otherwise, we would just be making a wish list that would be based off of the assumption that resources are infinite and that the cost of the capital and labor required to turn those resources into a particular consumer good is the exact same as the cost of turning those resources into any other consumer good. It would be impossible to completely fulfill this wish list, and if one were to go forward with actually producing things based off of this wish list, then resources, capital, and labor would not be allocated toward their best uses, which would cause a depression, which we could only get out of by allowing the markets to set real prices. It seems that what the Venus Project advocates is an economy where a central computer keeps track of the Earth's limited resources, and then conducts consumer surveys to initially find out what to produce, and from there on out decides what to produce based on monitoring which consumer goods are freely consumed. Having consumers fill out some forms as to what material things they want, or monitoring which items they consume for free, simply cannot tell you what you should actually produce with the scarce resources, capital, and labor that you have, so as to best satisfy the wishes of consumers. Because the wish list that the consumers are providing you through forms and usage are based off of the false assumption that resources are infinite and that there are no production costs. Why? Because the Venus Project refuses to allow money, and thus it refuses to allow prices that communicate resource scarcity and production cost information to the consumer. Without prices, product A, which requires hundreds of times more resources, capital, and labor to produce, will have the exact same cost as product B, at least as far as the consumer is concerned, that cost being zero. Thus, without this resource and production information, consumers will provide a false list of what to produce, and the best that the central computer can do is simply guess at what it should actually produce based off of these false wish lists that do not take scarcity of resources, capital, and labor into account. It would be impossible for the central computer to objectively convert these false wish lists into a cardinal list of marginal utility, because it lacks the individual identities of all of the consumers in the economy, and thus it would not be able to predict their decisions. Therefore, this centrally planned society that vilifies individuality and prices would offer a much lower standard of living than an emergent society that embraces a free market, since the free market would be able to calculate through prices how to allocate resources so as to best satisfy people's wishes, something that simply cannot be done without private property, free exchange, and sound money.